Namaste and welcome everyone. Good to be here with you again today. We'll continue today with the daily dozen, a dozen or so suggestions as to how we might together or separately fathom our real truth, our divinity, and how we live that day to day in ways that we may not have thought of before. The real purpose of this list, of course, is not so that you do what I might suggest, but rather that you might develop your own ways, plural, of becoming more aware of your authentic being and to live it thus. Okay, so step number 5, or proposal or suggestion number 5, cross over the bridge. If anything is pulling you down, seems intuitively wrong, or is giving you bad vibrations, get out of the situation as quickly as you reasonably can. No job, no relationship, no circumstance is worth being destroyed over. Obviously, you don't want to just bail out of a relationship without first carefully assessing whether the situation can and should be salvaged. But also remember that while love is a voluntary obligation to care about humans and beings, loving them doesn't necessarily mean that we need to live with them to prove our love. That's a mistake many lived erroneously. In this context, it will be very important to examine your own role in any disturbing relationship or circumstance to determine whether the real cause is your attitude toward life at the moment, rather than someone else's doing or not doing. Reflect deeply with brutal honesty, own your part in the relationship, and change what needs to be changed within you. But then move on with life, either with or without the relationship. In such circumstances, it might also be helpful to keep in mind that we are not saviors in the sense of needing to save everyone. Staying in a relationship beyond our ability to be helpful, even recognizing that we cannot truly change others, they must do that themselves, we become free to move on. So, for example, if you are being abused on a regular basis, terminate the relationship. Stepping away from abuse defends your internal integrity, and it may help the abuser face the truth for her or himself. Be sure to face the reason for abuse, or you may find that because of some abuse inflicted earlier in your life, you may think you deserve no better. Be sure to take time to learn the lessons it must teach you before you go on. Pardon me, or abuse will rear its ugly head again and again, getting worse and worse until you do learn. When all is said and done, staying in an abusive relationship is self-abusive. Just count the ways yourself. Should you determine you are not the root of the problem, then honestly share your real reasons for change with those responsible, so all concerned can learn from the situation and have the opportunity to become free from any guilt or ill feelings before the separation is completed. Be aware that burning bridges leave such emotional debris and wreckage which will need to be faced one day. From that point of view alone, bridges ought not to be burned, but they need to be faced and crossed when warranted. There is one major caution, however. Be sure that whenever there is loss or change of any real magnitude, that you take time to properly grieve the change. We normally think of grieving things like death or divorce, but changes in a relationship, location, or job all contain equally important elements to grieve, even if they are changes we would label as good for us. Any major transition needs to be honored. Most of us have been taught erroneously that in times of separation, we can work out our feelings by ourselves, and we ought not to cry, or we just need to keep ourselves busy, substituting another form of activity for the grieving activity, or that time alone will take care of it all. Simply not so. Any form of separation needs to be dealt with sensitively, accepting responsibility for our own healing. Leaving a good job for a better one, or moving from a place that has been good for you, that one offers you better opportunities in your current state of affairs, are very positive events. Yet each has elements to grieve, people to properly say goodbye to, and thanks and praise to be given. For those who fail to consider this kind of treatment as important will more than likely bury their feelings, somehow feeling incomplete in the transition, yet not knowing why. So rather than moving through loss, we use those tactics we learned so well as youngsters to avoid loss. By treating loss in this fashion, we avoid facing our real selves in the process. Such denial can only spell trouble in the future, for that which is denied is likely to show up as some kind of neurosis, psychosis, physical illness, karma, or as that same lesson to be learned before we can go on to something new, really free. It is also important to remember that it is not only the objective change that needs to be grieved. The subjective or symbolic change is even deeper and needs careful attention. What meaning relationships and events have in our lives determines the nature of the grieving process we apply. In dealing with losses and changes intellectually and emotionally are very different matters. How to deal with separation requires an important set of skills, so I recommend the Grief Recovery Handbook by John W. James and Frank Cherry, or some similar source for this purpose. I'm sure you already know one or several. There are other things that weigh us down as well. Old habits, worries, and fears are a few. Jesus said that our burden can be made light by living lovingly, and we begin that by being loving toward ourselves. I have heard my son Todd say that many of us carry our stones in a knapsack on our back. These stones take on what Todd calls situational gravity. Just as our knapsack feels heavy when we pay undue attention to the Earth's gravity, the more attention we pay to these imaginary problems and incidents in our lives, the greater our burden becomes. Did you ever worry needlessly about obtaining the money to do something, only to have it somehow mysteriously show up in your purse or raincoat pocket just at the right moment? If you insist on carrying those stones around with you all the time, sooner or later, the gravity of the situations will weigh you down and crumble your constitution. The only ways to rid yourself of such heavy burdens is to give the stones away as soon as you recognize them for what they are. Change your worrisome habits and throw your knapsack away. Let go and let God, that is your inner voice, as the expression goes. Your burden will be made light, your back and shoulders will soon feel much less stress, and you will be free, ever more free, to just be. 6. It matters not what they call me, their loving hearts are the same. This is interesting. Give serious thought to your concept of life, but whatever you do, don't overthink it. Real life is in your heart, not in your ego mind, and thus may well be simply a mystery. Your own definition may not be clear, or if it is, it may well change over time and as a result the experience you give to life. Also, watching our behavior carefully will tell us our current working definition of how we manifest our soul's condition and desire. Where our heart is, so are we. In our heart, if our heart is loving, we express love. If it is filled with self-hate, hateful actions too are sure to follow. Listen to others speak of the divinity of love, read about love, investigate alternative spiritual practices, visit various sacred places. But remember that we feel sacred only when we authentically and genuinely live the essence of the divinity we are. We are obligated to search deeply to find what works best as us for now, with a pledge to ourselves that we will change as a new me arrives. Continual monitoring of our behavior alongside our intentions is a good teacher. We will soon know that the hour to change is now, if we are alert and aware in our relationship with our loving essence. In a more intellectual and conceptual sense, as you search for your own vision of divine, you will come across as many other definitions as there are people. It is said there is only one real essence of being with many names. Of course, each of the formal religions has its own definition tied to the teachings of or about a central figure. Jesus, Buddha, Mohammed, Allah, Ali Baba, the sun god, the goddess of love, Mother Mira or Amchi, Yahweh, on and on and on. Seemingly, this array of beliefs can become very confusing until we come to see the central thread that runs through all, the essence of love. Most of the religions base their teaching on the divinity of love, and the transcendent, transformational message of each is that the only way to our heaven on earth is through love. The symbolic or metaphorical representations being Jesus, Buddha, Mohammed, Allah, Ali Baba, the sun god, the goddess of love, Mother Mira, Amachi, Yahweh, etc. On it goes. So whenever we hear or read about any of these figures teaching us that the only way to God is through me, what is really being said is that the only way to the bliss and peace of love is through demonstrating the essence of love each is by exercising the loving ways that are ours by the gifts of birth. But we must remember that no matter what the condition or situation, we remain as the loving essence we are. We need to remember and regularly acknowledge that we are loved before we can be loved in all situations. I find it difficult to believe that the central figure in any of the world religions ever meant to convey that either a formal religion ought to be formed to worship that individual, or that the personification of love in the flesh was ever meant to convey any more than a simple, single but profound truth. Loving is both the way and the end. Did Jesus not say, I am what I am? And what was it he said he was? Love. Thus it can only be through loving as a way of life, that commitment to living from within, which brings us to eternal peace, our heaven on earth. The only way to God is through me, or by following me, the human expressed as divine love. Thus becomes the awareness that the only way of being loved is through the expression of loving as our way of life. Anything short of that, it seems to me, is a form of idolatry. Love loving with all your heart and mind and soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. Thus becomes quite simple commandments for a life free from guilt, shame, fear, and despair. Developing your own view of the divine is likely to be particularly troublesome if you've been raised in a specific religious doctrine. For most of us for whom this is the case, we are taught, or just plain told, what to believe. What we are to believe is our specific indoctrination. In some cases, we are also taught that whatever any other doctrine teaches is not correct, just plain wrong. My own path of understanding and living love is primarily to the teachings of Jesus, but soul is ecumenical and all-encompassing. I have learned to accept and respect each person's right to choose her or his own path to the divinity of love. I learned a great deal about love from others who practice these different but not opposing ways as their inner guidance. Years ago, I participated in a summer solstice sun dance near Santa Fe, New Mexico. I was awakened by our host at 4:30 in the morning with a wild scream as his alarm. As we trudged step upon arduous step to a mesa at the top of a nearby mountain, where we awaited the sun to worship with dance and song. The event deeply moved me, and I looked within for a clear understanding of the powerful spiritual activation that had transpired. Worship the sun god? What have I come to? I gave up my concerns in prayer by acting what my inner voice was saying to my heart, how I was supposed to respond to God's renderings, and what was the most important thing I was to remember. The answer that came filled my heart to overflowing with loving understanding. That particular piece that came to me is entitled, It Matters Not What They Call Love. Here's the poem. Respect the ways of others. Their ways may be unusual, but their hearts are of love, and that is all that matters. You will do well always and everywhere to respect the ways of locals. As long as they pray with love in their hearts, they are coming to truth no matter what they call love, their calling. Their calling is for love and peace and harmony. Are these not life's callings for mankind? You see, we are one, the same. Let not words or names or events by any other name be an affront to you. The loving heart is the same, and the search for truth is the same. Contemplate this for a bit. Be in your temple with love and make your own decisions about the mystical divinity of love. Each of us comes to peace with this in life's own time, in love's own way. 7. Oh, shit. 7. If you really give me what you know I want, why do I need to ask? Take time now to find out what you truly like and don't like in your life. Returning to home and a joy-filled life starts with us, not with someone else's idea of us. What kinds of foods, books, movies, spaces, vegetation, wearing apparel, music, and art do you prefer? After my divorce, I found I had for 26 years given up much I liked or wanted for the sake of others. In a sense, my life had become a blur. I took the next year or so to visit galleries to find out what kind of art I appreciated. I listened to various kinds of music to find my preferences, cooked many recipes to test my palate, all to re-educate myself with an eye-opener it was, and what a great time I had doing it. I not only learned about what I did and did not like, but even more important, I learned to respect and enjoy myself in a wide variety of settings and circumstances. What a revelation that was, and it continues even to this day. What do you want your wholesome, supportive environment to contain, to feel like, to look like? Visualize your ideal environment. Do you like more light or less? More vibrant colors or more subtle? Do you prefer to work inside or outside, with people or things? Test yourself continually about these and other matters important to you. Try out new ideas and discard those no longer useful to a joyful life. Remember, our attitude towards others and things governs the joy we feel. Others and things don't bring us joy. We are only led to believe that others can make us happy, so we will purchase things or manipulate others to our satisfaction. None of that is a good idea. Contemplate in the depths of your heart. Make your own decisions for what is right for you, and they most always will be. If for some reason your last decision turns out to be inappropriate this time, it takes just one more decision to change to something else. It's not a matter of being right or wrong. That's the judgmental self speaking. It's only a matter of growing in our ability to be our highest self. All of life is to help us remember ourselves as the true image of love we are. It serves to help us grow, so no matter what we do, if we are alert to life lessons, we grow from them. Mistakes are only that, and they too help us grow. Mistakes are important to us and not signs of stupidity or lack of worth. Mistakes are like other forms of learning, and growing longs to be celebrated, not feared. Unfortunately, we have come to fear mistakes, thinking that they will keep us from gaining the approval we'd like. Learn, celebrate, forget the curse of fear, and enjoy all of life. A new email friend of mine recently explained his dilemma, doubts fed by fear within that caused some confusion about where he needed to live, to stay in Oregon, or to follow his inner calling to New Mexico. Gordon put it this way. Like many people caught up in the business world, I'm inwardly an artist or artisan whose work in the world has little to do with that inner character. Though I've always chosen to live in green and pleasant geographic areas, I've always been haunted by a desert I carry within me. This is the desert where the creative impulse struggles for subsistence, the world of work. It's always been the case that no more than a trickle of the water of my inner life is able to flow down into my workaday world. Where a garden should be, there is only desert. A desert isn't lifeless, but it doesn't support the delicate and very variegated life of the garden. I wasn't meant to live in this inner desert, and this may be why the outer desert invokes a sense of weakening or alienation. Yet if my personal life were full and abundant, it's likely I wouldn't care so much about whether the hills around me were brown or green. The whole thing may not be a metaphor at root, but there may be something going on in the etheric level here, where I instinctively try to draw the nourishment that should come from creative fulfillment from the surrounding environment instead, from the realm of plants specifically. The message to go to New Mexico might be the call to break the etheric dependency, which doesn't really fulfill the inner need anyway, and really make an effort to develop creatively so that there isn't this schism between inner and outer. It very well could be that its sympathetic influence of the vegetable realm is like a balm that soothes the injuries that my eclectic body may have suffered because of circumstances in life, and because of this, I am inordinately drawn to it. Yet any such injury is only a symptom. The problem lies deeper than that. And this etheric influence can't heal anything beyond its own level. The result? A stalemate that prevents further evolution. I don't let myself feel my own inner barrenness directly. Instead, I use a natural anesthetic to dull the pain. At the same time, the easy availability of this drug as they in the places gravitate forward makes it harder for me to wake up and change. Well, here's my grand theory, but really I don't feel a need to fathom the intellectual meaning or move to New Mexico. If the impulse becomes strong and clear enough, I'll do it. The message isn't strong enough for me at this time, though. It was really more obvious to a few others who probed into this with me, but I can't act on the intuition when my own is not clear. In order to weather the challenges and the strangeness of the change, I gotta have faith, not just reasons. Gordon speaks so profoundly to the challenge of living true to the soul's calling, but in his inner struggle he doesn't succumb to his intellect. Hence the illumined admonition to live by your inner faith, and not just the outward appearance of rightness, a mistake I suspect is lived by all too many of us. Just as in all manifestation, what comes to us is what we give ourselves genuine permission to have. Our essence of love knows what is in our hearts. Just be sure that what is in your heart is really what you need and desire at the very deepest levels. As the expression goes, be careful what you ask for, because you might really get it, like it or not. That's one of the rules of the universe. My friend Annie jokingly asks, when asking for something, be very specific. Asking for water could mean a flood. One thing we know for sure, when we put our inward voice first, everything else falls into place. Suggestion 8. But I don't want to be a pot when I grow up. Take time to find out what your life's work is to be. To paraphrase Parker J. Palmer, the spiritual writer and speaker, our vocation is love. Our avocation is expressing love. Are you enthused about what you do day in and day out for a living? The term enthused comes from entheo, meaning in God. The real question then becomes, do you feel a fullness of enthusiasm in your life's work? Matthew Fox's The Recreation of Work speaks most eloquently to this need in all of us. Quote, make no mistake about it, many of us are unduly influenced by the success syndrome we have been led to understand so well, So much so that many of us put financial success ahead of the condition of our soul. In sharp contrast, Eric Butterworth in Spiritual Economics puts work in a perspective well worth considering when he says so powerfully, when you work in the right consciousness, when you work in your right consciousness, when your work becomes organically part of your whole self, and when you do your work out of the commitment, no matter what other people do, no matter what the compensation may be, doing it for the health of your own soul, then you open the door by which the influence of the universe flows forth into your life. Many of us have taken a certain path for our life's work by simply falling prey to the easiest way or the closest opportunity, rather than really understanding what kind of work and work environment would make us happy. It sort of feels good, and if we take a decent living, and we make a decent living, but we're not really happy, or truer yet, we're not joyful, expressing what we really are. Although I enjoyed much of my 14 years as a college and university CEO, it took me a long time to realize that I didn't need to work 8 days a week in order to exercise what gave me the greatest joy, bringing people together to utilize their life-giving creativity for the greater good of others. Along the way, I also learned of other avenues for creativity within me that were just itching to show their faces. Show their faces they did, and my life is much richer for permitting it to happen. Rather than slugging it out in the trenches for years like I did before you learn this lesson, I suggest you use some of the methods that follow to find your real desires and talents. It will save a lot of time and energy you might well use otherwise. Chances are, sometime earlier in life, we listened to someone else say this or that would be good for us, or this or that wouldn't be good for us. Despite our own inner glow, we felt about the same particular thing we just knew we loved. Or we may have been influenced by someone else's example, a favorite aunt who just loved nursing, or your father, the very successful lawyer. Those are admirable occupations, and they might well be right for us if they were indeed our heart's deepest desire. I suspect most of us have been shaped by our parents or some other loved one, much like the one shapes clay into a pot. Only we are not clay, and we don't need to be a pot. We need only to be ourselves. The real distinction to be made is that the clay that's to shape us into life's image is the stuff of love. The clay used by others to make up their image of us is plastic, and we all know the superficiality of plastic as a container or soul's calling for us when compared to real clay. The point is, do you really know what it is you truly want to do with life? A favorite question I like to ask those who are burned out in their current jobs or who are completely in a fog about what it is they want to do next is, if money were not a consideration, that is, if you could do anything in the world knowing that the money you need to live on would follow, what would that one thing be starting tomorrow morning? It's amazing how quickly the answers come and how enthusiastically they are expressed. Trust that for you this answer would be your burning bush, that thing you will feel passionate about and compassionate for others with, which fills your heart with a sacred event of enthusiasm. Your answer must be genuinely lived, or your soul will either wither from lack of expressing its truth. Put another way, the journey of our truth is right for us now and always. The road of others' expectations is but a detour to our own eventual truth. For many of us, fear of living our truth basically comes from fearing the lack of resources to make it happen. It is a law of the universe that when the correct spiritual decision is made, when we commit to living our personal truth, the resources follow. Do what you love, the money will follow, by Marsha Sinitar, is about that law. It is only because we have been taught to play life safe that we are ignorant of the more powerful laws of the universe, thereby subjecting ourselves to an intellectual and emotional space which stifles our spirit and damages our soul and keeps our pockets empty. If you're wanting to work through some old issues on this regard, I recommend Barbara Scher's Witchcraft, How to Get What You Want, How to Get What You Really Want. After using the book, I think the title should be How to Express What You Really Are. In any event, providing you take quest seriously, Cher will take you very methodically through a series of steps that you are sure to result in unmistakable clarity about what your direction is that you must take. The thought of change may be frightening at first, but the thought of staying mired in something that is displeasing or unfulfilling is even more overpowering. So take the time to locate your heart's truest desire and leap. Think of it this way. If you leap, either love's waves will catch you or you'll be taught to fly. Either is a much better alternative than staying mired in the quagmire of illusional safety. In my own circumstance, I left the field of higher education after 30 years of teaching and administration. Life was comfortable, and I enjoyed much of the labor due to my nature. Even so, there came a time when I simply knew I must move on. The call to something new was that strong, even though I had no idea what that something new was to be. Fear caused me to delay my decision somewhat, but when an opportunity came for me to exercise an early retirement option, I did so and moved to Santa Fe without portfolio or job in hand. A full 3 years later, I came to see the opening of the Grand Plan when I received a phone call from the same Pecos Monastery asking if I would be their first part-time lay director of public relations and fundraising. My heart was filled with joy of anticipation and the peace of knowing that life's ways are in charge of all aspects of my life. In the shower one morning following the acceptance of this appointment, I dared ask God if I spent 30 years in higher education as preparation for working in a monastery. The answer came as a resounding bout of laughter, suddenly knowing the truth of the silent affirmation within. Our inner voice has a wonderful sense of humor and a perfect sense of timing, and each day is a new joy to behold and be grateful for. Another helpful source is Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way. By the title, you may think this book deals only with those who think they are or might want to be an artist. But Cameron's work goes much deeper than that. There is some kind of an artist in each of us, just waiting to be expressed. The artist is our innermost self, looking for just the right means to say, here I am, here's what I really like. And art is about that, to whom, in whatever form it shows itself. Look at the external expression of the artist or individual. Learn to read such expressions as the metaphors they are, and you will find the heart of the artist within prominently displayed. Many of us strive to know more about ourselves by using the Myers-Briggs inventory, the Enneagram, astrological charts, and Chinese mythology. Such aids can be helpful, providing we don't identify with or make gods out of what we find out about ourselves. Although we may display characteristics of an INFP on the Myers-Briggs inventory, we are not an INFP or anything it portrays. We are love, portrayed through these characteristics. The same is true when I proclaim myself to be, let us say, an athlete. I am not an athlete. I am love, and I merely express my love through the vehicle of athletics. Unfortunately, when we identify with a characteristic, we tend to paint our world with it. Herein lies the danger of their use, so use these tools wisely. Perhaps the most startling understanding is to come out of all this is that our primary responsibility in life is to be an unabashed expression of the art of loving. Our job is to remember what love is and what it is not, and to clean out the latter so we can live the former. In simpler terms, we are artists of loving. Our vision is one of loving. Our medium is loving. Our tools are loving. The ultimate product is loving. The pathway, certainly, is loving. We can manifest love through whatever we do as human beings, for we are beings of love, and loving is expressed through all we do is our truest life's work. This is our only real purpose. I said it definitely earlier. Our purpose is to be fully aware and to live like one who is. These are one and the same expression. No matter which phrase we choose to describe our purpose, our lives become nothing but the authentic expression of the loving way. Number 9. Where's the party? Closely akin to the last item, life is important, so celebrate. Make every event a celebration of what you are. One Sunday, a church service I attended began an inspirational song, The Rose. Some say love, it is a river that drowns the tender reed. Some say love, it is a razor that leaves our soul to bleed. Some say love, it is a hunger and an endless aching need. I say love, it is a flower, and you need only its seed. It's a heart afraid of breaking that never learns to dance. It's a dream afraid of waking that never takes a chance. It's the one who won't be taken, who cannot seem to give, and the soul afraid of dying that never learns to live. When the night has been too lonely and the road has been too long, and you think that love is only for the lucky and the strong, just remember in the winter, far beneath the bitter snow, lies the seed that with the sun's love is the spring becomes the rose. I say love, it is a flower, and you the only seed. If we could only fathom the fullness of this understanding and celebrate all we are through all we do, life would indeed blossom into a bouquet of love. Celebrate your relatedness, for it is in the relationship that we find ourselves. For example, I find it healthy to begin every waking day in celebration of relationship, all my relationships. On the date of our wedding vows in each month, for example, my former spouse and I, at the very least, exchanged cards, making special note of our relationship. This way we got to celebrate the relationship we treasured more than once a year. When we took time to celebrate each day as we awoke, every day then became special. When any of us takes time to celebrate, as we retire at night with expressions of gratitude, the gifts of relationship witnessed throughout the day, this single act acknowledges love's continual presence in our lives and our appreciation for it. I appreciate you being in my life. It goes a long way with life itself, too, after all. Not because life needs that as a sign of appreciation, but because it releases the goodness in our hearts to acknowledge the truth of relationship. Loving is at its center, and living in love provides the peace and joy for which we all strive. It is that acknowledgement which gladdens our heart, for in so doing, we are engaging in the remembering with love that life has as our ultimate purpose. I'm seeing if I can finish this here. The same is true in our relationship with others and things. Find a simple but overt way to celebrate your relationship with your co-workers, your friends, your spouse, your dog or cat, yes, even your home, your car, your favorite tree, or music. Everything is at one with us. So celebrate everything, absolutely everything. Make celebration a sacred ritual, for it is that. All it takes is appreciation expressed as a joyful heart. Matthew Fox said, has said it this way during a presentation he made in Santa Fe. Praise is the noise joy makes. We are the joy of divinity. Everything else is but a detail. Celebrate even with your touches, your tears, your laughter, your hugs. Holding back is a sign of indifference and will eventually turn your heart to stone. When we place ourselves in indifference to or with something or someone, we are not in love. Necessary human rituals long to be expressed and need to be honored. You honor your highest self when you express what you are in whatever form, for you are being authentically you. You are not pretending you are something you are not, so your dignity is rendered sacred. I have often discussed the sadness I feel when thinking of the rights of the widowed elderly who have no one with whom to express love through touching. They eventually suffer from touch deprivation, and their soul begins to wither on the vine. Perhaps that is the reason why so many people have pets they can touch or stroke. Touching is a beautiful expression of trust and relationship, and can be conveyed in a sensitive manner, without any thought of sexual connotation at all. Touch with honorable intentions, and honorably it will be received. Freely shedding tears is another way of celebrating what we are in the moment. I have found that tears founded in separation are sometimes stingy and salty, while tears found in unity, in love, are soft, warm, oily, and of a healing quality. It is sad that society has taught us not to cry publicly. Particularly, men have been taught not to cry, that to cry is not manly, whatever manly is. Even if tears begin only as an expression of sentiment, they eventually lead us to deeper levels of being. That is the nature of crying, and a major purpose for its existence. I attended a weekend spiritual retreat for men several years ago, which brought us very close to one another in a very short period of time. When it came time to say our goodbyes, a big, strong ex-football player about 35 years old, while hugging me with tears in his eyes, said, "I want to thank you for being an example for me." I figured if someone your age could cry, then I could. I haven't cried since I was a baby. I can't tell you what a relief it is to know it's okay for me as a man to express my feelings this way. Let us not make the same mistake with those we raise. It's a sign of strength to express yourself genuinely, all parts of yourself, all your feelings. To stuff feelings is to set the stage for major dis-ease with life. Expressing ourselves freely, authentically, is a cure for much that ails us. Our feelings are a teacher for moving us forward. A brief story about hugging that will make its own point. Let us call her Mary. Mary had been rendered hug-shy by a mother who gave birth to her at age 16, blaming Mary for her circumstances. Mary grew to understand that she was not loved, and so grew up in her distrust of others in the matters of love. Now in her 30s, Mary attended a 4-day retreat with Amachi, an East Indian religious woman, a saint, many say. One night, Amachi went to hug Mary. Mary responded in her characteristically tentative fashion, like some kind of invisible shield separated her from Amachi, offering only a part of her guarded heart and only one arm. Amachi telepathically responded with no, like this, putting Mary's arms around her, squeezing firmly, tenderly, lovingly. Mary's heart opened wide, feeling and giving, perhaps for the very first time, unbridled love and complete trust. Mary hugs much differently now, for she has learned by divine grace that just like eye contact or a gentle touch, a hug is an unmistakable imprint of love that seals our relationship with trust. And it gives love twice, once to the other and second to ourselves. Love thy neighbor as thyself. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. On a different level, my father used to tell me that the way to enjoy is to find a way to enjoy, to be with joy in everything I do, whether it was mowing the lawn, picking berries, or painting a house. Dad began teaching me by mowing the lawn with me, and when I was a child, showing how patterns in the grass would be fun to create. He showed me the joy of painting a French window by sharing the tricks of his trade and by encouraging me to sing or whistle when I worked. Of course, what my father was really sharing was the joy of creation, how to find my deepest being and to express it through all I do. Now that is joy. A great teacher was my father, to the point where one of my sons often tells me I don't know how to be bored. I think that son now knows better too. What a blessing that is. The point is, when you are able to find joy, your divine self, in all you do, and express what you do, what you are through all you do, everything can then be celebrated as a sacred event. Whatever you do will be your meditation, a gift to life, your continual life's prayer. It is your life's work. When you can reach this point, you will find yourself in relationships with those who also are celebrations of their very existence. Your surroundings will appear as celebrations, and your life's work likewise. We even finally come to treat the very extensive environment which supports us in this life as celebration, rather than demeaning its dignity by ruining its rivers, polluting its air, and clear-cutting its trees. When in doubt, celebrate. I'll finish with the last expression, the 10th, number 10. Why are you killing God with that cigarette? That really sounds strange. Our body is our temple. It is the means for manifesting our highest spiritual self. If you believe as I do, we are created as one. We are one with all beings. In that sense, I am in all beings and all are in me. Because this is so, it is incumbent upon me to treat my temple of all life with reverence, also requiring myself to treat all other temples of being likewise, to respect them, hopefully, is nothing less than an example for them to emulate. From this knowledge flows the ways in which I feed my body, exercise it, cleanse it, shelter it, rest it, and otherwise nourish it. Wellness requires much patience in searching out the very best ways to live holistically in order to reach and maintain my fullest integrity, mentally, physically, and spiritually. Although we as humans are all endowed with the same basic needs for food, clothing, shelter, and a need to express love, given our individual life histories, each of us is unique in the ways we must relate with these ingredients. So while certain foods, exercises, and other treatments may be good for all of us, within such categories we must find those which resonate most clearly with our innermost needs. Simplicity is the key. Treat the exotic and complex as the enemy. Simple food, simple travel arrangements, simplicity in relationships, and in exercising one's day all create peace as life flows. Living simply also permits an abundance of adventure to flow unimpeded by the complexities we so often indulge ourselves with, mostly as complexities we have created in our mind. As we come to find and live our individual best in the moment and request that others respect our choices and support us in their fulfillment, we too must respect the divine domain of the other, trusting that they too are making similar choices for their own highest good. However, sometimes we need to be reminded of offenses to ourselves or another, lest we once again forget our primary commitment to the highest good, individually and collectively. I'll never forget the following incident one day when walking back to my hotel in Washington, D.C., following a meeting several blocks away. I found myself alongside a young woman smoking a cigarette. I looked at her, smiled, and said something intelligent like, listen to this intelligence, "How are you?" She acknowledged my greeting, and we strolled side by side a few steps further, when, totally without warning, out of my mouth came the following: "Do you believe that God resides in you?" Startled for a moment, she fumbled, "Why, yes, I do." Well, if you do, I responded, why are you killing God with that cigarette? Oh my God, she gasped, disgustedly casting her cigarette aside. I momentarily learned to tell my colleague to tell him what had happened, returning my attention immediately to the smoker as she was okay, only to find her nowhere in sight. In a street scene only sparsely populated, she had totally disappeared. I hope her cigarette smoking habit had vanished just as easily. Permit one more story to complete the point about living more simply. Recently, I was deeply moved by some of Salgado's black and white photographs. By dialoguing with this deep feeling, I learned that I was connecting with that very place from which I photograph, and in the medium, black and white, soul work that expressed what I am best. In the ensuing conversation, I was directed to simplify my artistic life by selling all my equipment, all of it, beginning again with just one camera I thought best for that work, and letting nothing deter me from that goal. I was told that I had been scattering my creative energy by photographing a fairly wide variety of substance with a broad range of equipment. To the point, all this was deterring me from expressing my deepest self in a manner best suited for the process of my spiritual expression. I asked, and I got my answer. Not what was I to do with it. If I am learning nothing else, it is that when I am guided from within, I must follow that guidance, or it is sure to dry up as my authentic guide. And so I did. Within a few days, I learned of a camera swap and sale, arranged to sell all my equipment, and instructed as an affirmation to be sure it was easy and simple to accomplish as a sure sign of love's hand, and it worked. On that day of the sale, before my doors even officially opened, I sold to a few dealers some pieces I thought I surely would get stuck with. Another affirmation. As the day ended, seemingly effortlessly, within lots of thanks for the inquiry and or sale, all but a few fragments sold, over $7,000 worth. Talk about affirmation. I told the salesperson next to me about my adventure, and he volunteered to steer people my way for the remaining few pieces of equipment, and he did yet another affirmation. The arrangements made to photograph black and white soul work went swimmingly, again affirming the correctness of simplifying a significant part of my life and placing me in a place where I could best express my calling and connection with the soul at large. Doing what is best for our own highest good is the most authentic road I travel. Oh boy, we're getting up there, but I'm going to finish this chapter. I am what I am, what I am. Understand this down to the very marrow in your bones. It is none of your business what anyone thinks about you. Simple to say, but sometimes difficult to live. Nearly all we're taught by the masterminds of the marketing and advertising world is that the only thing that matters is what others think about us. Wear this, drive that, use this, take that, go here, live that way, behave in this fashion. The implication is if you don't, others will think less of you. Where does it end? Unfortunately, if we're not very careful, it all ends in the expectations of those who control such thinking. How do we fight this concept of living that is so dominant in our Western culture? It is an insidious game, and the only way we win such games is not to play them. Don't buy in. The same is true in all games of life, like the game of manipulation or drug use, for example. The only way to win the game is to not play the game. Don't take the bait to compete. Live by your own standards, which have been discerned in communion with your loving heart. As an expression goes, you know in your heart what it's right to do. do that and none else. Like anything of worth, this will take some practice, but you can and must follow your own heart if you are to live authentically. If you are going to be genuinely you and not someone else's expectations of you, or what you falsely think are someone else's expectations for you. The real long-term benefit of living true to your heart is that the mind comes to store and use truth as your new way of living and being. Then all of life aligns with your truth. If we go throughout life acting only to please others, to seek their approval, we end up selling our soul to the devils of self-deceit and fear of lack or affirmation or approval, all nothing but imitations of the real devil, fear. Are you willing to pay the price? When we make decisions or act on the job or in a relationship out of our concern for what everyone else thinks, rather than assessing whether those decisions and actions are true to our heart, we will have deceived ourselves in major proportions, and we will deceive those others as well, big time. Understand that when you behave authentically, there will be trouble, difficulties that will ensue, plenty of them, but those truly are not your concern. Oh, you may wish to explain your decision or action out of courtesy and respect, but you never need to defend it. The rightness, the truth of a particular decision or action stands on its own merit. Chances are your decisions are not going to please everyone. If they are made authentically, they are decisions out of your heart after all, and not someone else's. So the decision or action is perfectly right for you, but may or may not be for anyone else. And that's absolutely okay. You are responsible for living only what you are, not what anyone else is or wants of you. When you invite the Holy Spirit into your life this way, you can expect a thorough house cleaning. As uncomfortable, even as arduous as it may seem, when you sweep away your own debris, you eventually will come to see yourself as you really are. As a result, you will manifest that to the wake of which you manifest that in the wake of what you firmly thought you were, seen as the image of the ramshackled shed you took for home. At another level, I have suffered at the hands of those who thought I should live in their image for me. But those same events have also taught me to love all, no matter what anyone does to me or thinks about me, as a result of living true to my heart. In my professional life, I have had to decide whether I was going to live by the dictates of others, forever fearing that their judgments and punishment, or live by the truth of my own heart and have peace within. Living by the truth of my heart has caused personal humiliation, loss of money, and unjust criticism from time to time. But in a brief analysis, I believe that I have always endeavored to act in the best interest of all concerned. Although I surely made my share of mistakes, so-called, restful sleep night after night told me that I had peace of heart, knowing that I did my best whenever it was called for. If relationship depends on whether someone else approves of you, then a relationship is not genuine. It's conditional on you doing what they want, and thus manipulative in nature. I will like you only if you behave this way, or act as I would, does not come out of genuine relationship. The strings attached to such relationships are too many to permit the freedom of heart that genuine relationship requires. Don't be fooled by the manipulator's golden rule, which drives such warped thinking. Whoever has the gold rules. The expectations of others is the makeup of what is known as fool's gold. The real gold is the truth of your heart, and it must rule if you are to be free to be you, if you are to live with peace of heart. There is no price worth giving your peace away, even though at first it will seem terribly painful to stick to your guns. on what you know is absolutely right for you. Staying with your truth gets easier over time and is one of the bedrocks of your salvation. Remember, your inner voice keeps you on track and affirms your authenticity just for the asking. By living this way, you will find that out of greater self-respect will come higher self-esteem and deeper respect for others as well, and fewer mistakes, far less stress, and freedom from a life filled with guilt, fear, shame, and judgment. On the whole, you will be a much happier person. Your life will be filled with joy. As a way to punctuate the meaning of living true to yourself, let's explore a story told by Sister Miriam Randall at the Pecos Benedictine Monastery. It takes place in the Zulu tribe in Africa. It is a myth about us. It is cast as a story of a young woman, the symbol of the feminine in each of us. When it came time for a young girl to teach womanhood, she would be given a necklace so the tribe would know she had reached her full rights as a woman. It was noticed that she was a child no longer. As the story goes, a group of young women all had their necklaces at the same time, but one got an exceptionally beautiful necklace, a reflection of what she was inside. The fullness of adulthood is love, expressed in the form of the individual. The other young women were jealous of the one and taunted her, and finally excised her from the group. Who was she, after all, to have this extraordinarily beautiful necklace? She felt rejected, and indeed was, but she couldn't by custom remove the necklace. It was who she was. One day the others decided to play a trick on her, for they were sick and tired of seeing this necklace on her. They planned a way to deceive her into giving her a necklace. Let's get her by the stream, and we'll take our beads off and hide them in the sand, they plotted. They invited her to join them, saying they didn't want to exclude her any longer. Where are your necklaces? She inquired. We're not supposed to take them off. Oh, we threw them in the stream as a sacrifice to God. You should do it too. Don't be afraid, they told her. Well, she was so happy to be included and so needy for love and acceptance, she followed their lead and did as they said. As her beautiful necklace sunk to the bottom of the river, the others all laughed, crying out, "You fool, we tricked you. At last we got rid of that necklace and you proud fool." They fetched their necklaces and left her alone, desolate and dejected. She thought and thought about what to do. She knew she didn't want to go after them, for they weren't the kind she wanted to be with any longer. She prayed, "Dear God, please give me back my necklace I so foolishly gave away. It's my identity with my people." She heard God say in response, "Jump in. Jump in the deepest part of the river." Obligingly, she jumped in, but couldn't find her necklace. Instead, she came face to face with a woman, the ugliest woman she ever saw. From the top of her head to the bottom of her feet, she was covered with open, runny sores. She was an awful sight. The young woman asked her who she was and why she had those wounds. The woman said, "Why, I am you, and you must kiss my wounds." The thought of doing this was repulsive, but being who she was, she began kissing the wounds out of compassion for the woman. Just then she heard a terrifying noise, and the woman told her she'd hide her from the monster that was looking for young maidens to devour. The monster smelled something, but he couldn't find the young maiden. So he left in disgust. The woman said to the maiden, "Your gift is compassion, so I want you to wear this necklace even more beautiful than the one you lost, like no other necklace anywhere. This is your own necklace. It is your identity, and it is gorgeous beyond all description. So go back to your family and live what you are, compassion." When the other young woman saw her new, even more spectacular necklace, they asked her where she got it. She told them to jump in the deepest part of the river, and they would see. They all threw away their necklaces and jumped in, looking for a better one. They couldn't find theirs or a new one, but came up against the woman covered with ruddy sores all over her body. "I am you. Kiss my sores, and I will give you a new necklace," she said. "Oh, no way," they screamed each of the other. "No way." Just then the monster approached, again sensing the taste of young maidens. Of course, the woman didn't hide the maidens, and they were swallowed up by the monster. The moral of the story, you may well see it differently, but to me its meaning is when we are true to ourselves, our life is not only safe, it is fulfilled in ways we couldn't even imagine. When we are not, however, we are devoured by our self-deceit, our pride and envy, and our egocentric egoism. We are devoured by the monsters of our very own creation. Number 12, whose voice is that I hear? And this is the last suggestion, and then we'll wrap this up. Clean out all your old life tapes. Respect the need in others to do the same. Oftentimes we find ourselves responding to something someone says as though yet another someone else from our past had said it. For the longest time, after my former wife and I had divorced, I heard things said with what I imagined were her intentions rather than the intentions of the current voice. Of course, no matter who is speaking, the real voice is my voice, the attitude with which I hear everything that is said. If I am not careful to clear away all those old dispositions, they become predispositions in my relationship with all newcomers in my life. Mining these old fragments of emotion is more lucrative than mining gold, for it establishes relationships on the basis of the authenticity in the moment, rather than on the illusions of the past. It is cleaner, healthier, richer, fairer, more honest, and open than living from the past or in fear of the future. Life becomes just what it is, out of no other motive than to live in the honesty of the moment. Of course, we must honor the same need and activity in others. This emotion-free communication is sometimes very difficult to exercise. We are so accustomed to reacting from what we think someone meant, rather than responding from the deeper place of love, placing no positive or negative valence whatsoever on what was just said, or trusting that what was said was done only out of the best motive. Sharing feelings may seem like a difficult and scary thing to do, until we realize that feelings are neither right nor wrong, they just are. As such, feelings cannot justifiably be judged or argued with any longer. They are just rendered neutral and lose their former value as a basis for argument, for telling someone they should or should not feel a certain way. Perhaps an example will help. I regularly exercise what I call keeping our slate clean. For example, on occasion, I could easily hear my ex-wife's voice when someone says the same thing she did, as I said earlier. I merely have to be reminded to ask the current friend what she meant by what she said, and the matter clears itself up. Likewise, each time something is said by either of us that appears to have a particular meaning, which is somehow upsetting, we could well raise it with the other, no matter how scary it feels to do so. I suppose out of fear of retribution or lack of approval. Nevertheless, I now do raise such feelings more regularly now, and it's amazing what comes with commitment to keeping our respective emotional slates clean. One at a time, we can deal with our feelings by telling what we feel when something out of ordinary character appears to be said by either of us. We simply need to ask for clarification of intent. The choice becomes whether we will be controlled or pushed around by our feelings or simply be informed by them, so we can respond to life with interior authenticity. On most every occasion, it turns out that what one thought the other said was only what the other heard in a certain way. But in dealing with it, we each get to face and resolve old thought habits from a past relationship In those cases where either of us has expressed an ulterior motive in our communication, perhaps not even consciously, we are provided the opportunity in a safe environment to examine it, to own it, and to apologize when necessary, and for the other to simply say, thanks. No judgment, no cursing out, no animosity of any kind, just, I'm sorry, and thanks. A nice way to honor truth in ourselves, in others, and in relationship. On the other hand, if we fail to face and clear out such matters in some way that provides a psychic, emotional safety to do so, we will soon fill up our inner emotional slate with feelings we have written on it. When a slate is filled to overflowing, it generally takes only a simple, usually harmless phrase to tip it over, spilling all the stored emotion onto the other in an avalanche of emotion, or at the very least, in some snide or other caustic reaction. Find a way to prevent such catastrophes from happening and keep the method simple so it will be regularly practiced until perfected. When the way is created where the environment for doing so is emotionally safe, having loving relationships flourish and abound. One last comment on feeling before closing. Whenever we give another permission to control our feelings, we deny ourselves the reality of what we feel at any given moment. For example, I am at a movie with a friend and am moved to tears by a scene. My friend, for whatever reason, nudges me and coughs, subtly suggesting I stop my display of emotions. I listen to him rather than going with the flow of my feelings, thereby stifling their honest expression. By my response, I not only give away my right to live and express what I honestly feel in a given situation, I unfairly give another person the responsibility for determining what I feel and how I feel. Such abrogation of responsibility to ourselves serves to establish the foundation for manipulation of our behavior and for creating conditional, even codependent relationships. Taking responsibility for all parts of our own life is the only way to live our truth and to encourage the same in all our relationships. Not all of the affirmation suggestions engage us from a perspective from that what we're not all the aforementioned suggestions engage us from a perspective different from that we are accustomed to using. Undoubtedly, we have many of our own that emanate from the same attitude of heart. The point, however, is just this. Be sure that whatever attitude you are using to experience life with is love, fulfilled, and you will rarely, if ever, be disappointed. At the very least, you will be content in your own heart, and you will have acted out of love. At the very best, your world will be filled with people, events, and circumstances that are radiant with the divine. 13, one more than a dozen, so we've got a baker's dozen here. Originally, there was to be a 13th suggestion listed above, but I chose instead to share the final suggestion as a story. The story is a metaphor for the digit 13, a parallel representation of the love spoken of so eloquently in the first chapter of Paul's letter to the Corinthians, verse 13. With eyes to see is about sacredness, the sacredness of dignity of all things when life is created and given out of an attitude of loving spirit. The ultimate truth is well illustrated by the story credited to author and poet Stephen Levine. It goes like this. Long ago, some monks and their abbot were living in a monastery perched high on a hill overlooking a village in the Far East. The immediate area was being ravaged by samurai warriors, and the monks became justifiably worried that they would be the next target. The abbot worked at calming them down and told the monks he would go to the village and deal with the samurais head-on himself. The others, of course, begged him not to go, but he reassured them that everything would be fine, saying that he would be certain to return safely by nightfall. The abbot proceeded on foot on foot into the village, where he was soon greeted by a band of samurais on horseback. The lead samurai, brandishing his sword above him, said, "You fool! Do you not understand that with this sword I have the power to destroy you?" The abbot responded calmly, "And do you not understand that I have the power to let you?" Whoa. Levine goes on to say, "But the abbot implies with a response, 'And I shall go into eternity loving you just the same.'" Further concludes Levine, the reader told his fellow samurais to leave the abbot and his monks alone, and years later, after the battle ended, the former samurai warrior himself went to study with the abbot, proclaiming him to see the greatest warrior he had ever known. Amen, I say to that. For me, the lesson of the story is that no matter what anyone does to me, whether they try to destroy me physically or by character assassination, the only thing that really matters is how I live my life, how I respond to the actions of others. This does not mean I do not defend my rights, but when my rights are violated, I and I alone must determine how I will respond, out of fear or out of love. I and I alone control my response to life's circumstances and situations. If I give that power away, I give with it my obligations to be my authentic self. When I maintain my authenticity, my sole purpose then becomes one of always loving, of acting from my deepest core of being, and being the example of loving I was created to be, out of understanding and compassion for my brothers and sisters. If we can use the lesson of this story as our guide, our light, we can then come to see ourselves as one with all of life, and therefore to treat all of it with loving respect and the highest form of dignity. Such is the sacredness of dignity, no matter what the form of life. Such is spiritual love, expressed in our own way of seeing, and that is of being. And so it ends. So ends that chapter. So ends what I think has become that I have come to love even more, the book With Eyes to See. I hope you have enjoyed it. We will move into a new book next week. I know not which yet, but I want you to know that I have enjoyed being with you. I can feel your energy. I can feel your love, your purpose in life being fulfilled, your struggles, with you seeing that you are really love personified with and for and by all. It's a beautiful thing. You are indeed the beautiful thing. So I want to close this book and this chapter with a post that I saw this last week. It's this: you can't start the next chapter of your life if you keep rereading the last one. That's called being stuck, isn't it? And we do so many times out of fear, we won't move on. We won't start that next chapter in our life. All it takes is the first word to start a new chapter, if you're writing it. All it takes is the first step to move on, if you're living it. So here it is again before we part today. You can't start the next chapter of your life if you keep rereading, or I would add, reliving the last chapter. All right, folks, until we meet next week, starting a new book, I hope you, in fact, have enjoyed this one. Share it with friends. Let people know what's going on. Give them an opportunity to look within themselves for the love they surely are. So until next time, my dear friends, namaste. I love you.